Welcome to episode 6 of the Mile 62 podcast. I'm your host, Richard Elkins, coming to you from Austin, Texas. We cover all things ultra running in the southern United States. On this podcast, I'd like to review my race at J&J Trail Race in Rock Springs, Texas, go over some ultra news and other topics on my mind, and then end it with a Unived Gel product review, technical review. Let's first start with my 100K trail race. This took place about a week ago on the 27th of September. J&J 100K trail race takes place in Rock Springs, Texas. That's about 1 hour from Kerrville, Texas. Kerrville, Texas is about 2 hours from San Antonio, Texas, so it's in southern Texas. This venue is called Camp Eagle. Many runners are familiar with this venue because Bandera 100 took place on this course in January due to the Bandera course was rained out. So it's a very technical and difficult course. In my opinion, one of the more challenging trail race courses in Texas. Just some logistics information if you plan to race this at this venue in the future. You really in the middle of nowhere. It's a very rural area of southern Texas, so you're driving about 1 hour from Kerrville, Texas. There's no stores, there's no places to eat, there's no gas stations. And then when you get to the main entrance for Camp Eagle, plan to about 30 minutes to drive down a 8-mile dirt road. There are some potholes. You don't want to drive a nice car to this venue, and you need to have ample time to get to the race in time. That's why I suggest that if you're racing in the morning, you really need to go there the night before. For this race, it was some kind of different. They had the 100K trail race starting at 7 p.m. on Friday night. So I took a half a day off, and I arrived to the venue, I think around 5 p.m. Got my packet, got ready. I kind of knew what to expect after racing there in Bandera. The way it turned out, starting at 7 p.m. was very challenging for me. I typically get up 5 a.m. every day for work. I'm a very early riser. And being that it was on Friday, I had to work half the day, and starting the race at 7 p.m. meant that, I already had a day in me before the race started. I started the race with, I think it was about 30 or 40 other trail runners. It was a small field. I expected a larger field, but one of my negative feedbacks for the race is the registration wasn't handled very well. Tejas Trails, which does a great job with races, and they don't use Ultra Sign Up, and the third party that they were using didn't list the registrants going into probably 1 or 2 weeks before the race. So it looked like a very small field, and I really attribute that to the small showing at the race. I think many people thought that the race crowd was going to be very small, so that they just weren't going to come out and race. Now, this was a 100-kilometer championship for the USATF, so there were runners out there competing for prize money. I was not. I think probably 75% of the field was out there for fun. The race got started at 7 p.m., so we had about 1 hour of daylight. And equipment-wise, I was using my UD vest. I had 2 lights. I had my Ultra Aspire waist light, and then I also had my black diamond headlamp, and I was running in Altra Olympus. I've been using Olympus off and on. It's their biggest shoe, and I've been even running on the roads with it. I have two different pairs. I have the new Olympus 3.5, and then I have a 3.0 version, and they've been working good for me. I have been getting good miles on the roads. You're probably laughing, thinking, "Why are you using a trail shoe on the road?" I just want to get used to the weight. It's a big shoe, and it takes some getting used to. I have a lot of many years experience with the Temp and the Lone Peak and other models, but this is their biggest shoe. And keep in mind, the most famous ultra runner out there, Dean Karnazes, he's always used trail shoes on the roads. One piece of trivia that a lot of people don't know, the reason he's always worn trail shoes on the road is because he's sponsored by North Face. And until recently, they did not make a road shoe. So Dean Karnazes has always used trail shoes on the road. And I use trail shoes on the road a lot too. I keep one pair at work that I use for my lunch runs, and then I alternate between Hoka, Cliftons. I just bought a new pair of Rincons, and I've got Evo Mafate, which is a big Hoka trail shoe, and then I've got the whole line of Ultra trail running shoes, and I alternate them. But this month I've been really spending a lot of time with the Olympus. I plan to use it in this race, but I also plan to use it in Javelina 100-mile race in October. So it did me well. I had one blister, which was a little bit is uncommon. I usually don't get a blister, but I attribute it to using the shoes too loose during the first half of the race. During the second half of the race, I did tighten them up, but I did get one blister on my heel. I typically don't get blisters. I use J&J toe socks, and I've had real good luck with them. I've tested out all three of their versions, the road and the trail, which is kind of a mid-thickness, and the ultra version, which is the thickest version. I use the trail and ultra version in most races, and I use the thin road one for road running. This race, that's what the equipment I was using in the run. I also carried one trekking pole. I have black diamond carbon poles. I carried one trekking pole because I know there's a lot of hills, there's a lot of rocks. It's a very technical course, the whole course. Even the runnable sections, you got to be very careful about the rocks. So I carried one trekking pole, and I felt pretty good the first lap. There's 3 aid stations, so basically you're starting off at the pavilion aid station, which is a start-finish. And for the 100K, you need to do 3 laps. So it's basically 3 20-mile laps, 20 miles and change. The first aid station, you're going to pass twice. So you're running counterclockwise loop. And the first, before you get to the first aid station, there's a bunch of new sections they added to the course, which weren't there in Bandera, where they bushwhacked it. Basically, you're running down the sides of hills. There's a lot of loose rocks kind of hidden in the grass, and you can tell that the trail wasn't there before the race. Then there are some nice single tracks, and then a lot of hill climbs. Some of them are Jeep roads, and then midway into the loop, there's one famous climb where you're climbing several 100 yards up a hill next to a fence line that's very rocky. It's so steep that if you don't have hiking poles, you literally need to put one arm on the fence and pull yourself up. It's a really challenging section of the course, especially in the dark, because there's a lot of loose rocks and it's easy to lose your footing. And if you did, you could slide down the whole hill. Well, after you climb that hill, you go back by that first aid station, and then you're going out and doing some small hill climbs, and then you find your way up to a water tower, which is the highest point on the course. You can see. Some people say you can see Mexico from there. I couldn't see that far, but it was very pretty from up there. That hill country area is very nice, and you can see the river down below. You come back down past the second aid station, and then you make your way out along the side of the property for, I want to say 8 miles. The next aid station is on the top of a hill. It's only water-only aid station, so it's optional. I made the mistake on the first loop to skip that station. I should have studied the material that they gave us before the race. I didn't realize it was so far. So by the time I came back to that mid-aid station, I was bone dry. And it was nighttime, but it was still in the probably high 80s, low 90s even at night. So you go through a very challenging section along near the river through a adjacent dry creek bed, and then you make your way back up going towards the pavilion. You go along the river and up a hill and then back towards the pavilion. So that was loop 1. Keep in mind it was dark. And loop 2, I finished the second loop. It was fairly uneventful. I did pretty well. When I went out from the pavilion, I grabbed my other pole, so I carried both poles. I didn't use them the whole time, but when I got to some really technical sections, I would pull them out and use them. I finished the second loop right as the sun was coming up, and then I took a short break at the pavilion, and then about 5 minutes, I turned in my lights into my drop bag and basically changed into just got ready for the sunlight. I got back out on the loop, and it got hot very fast, and I was prepared for that, but I got halfway through the loop and I realized that I didn't put on more sunblock. I was lucky because before I left on Friday, I put on sunblock. It was during the afternoon, and after the race, I realized I didn't get sunburnt, so I really applied it well on Friday, and I was really surprised because I sweat so much. I thought that the sunblock was gone. I thought I was going to really be burned. I spent almost a half a day. I finished the race early afternoon, but there was so much sun exposure on that third loop that I was really surprised I didn't get sunburned. But going in on the third loop, it was very challenging. One thing I'd like to add about the second loop was that the course did not have any caffeine, which was a big surprise to me. I've done probably 20 ultras, a lot of them with Tejas trails. They always have coffee or have tailwind with caffeine. Actually, I've complained in the past that too much of the tailwind was caffeinated, but I prefer coffee. Well, it turns out that there was no caffeine on the course, so right as I was finishing the second loop, I really started to get tired. And towards the tail end of that second loop, I was in going through the dry riverbed, and I was tired, and the riverbed was very challenging. It was dry, but had water in some places, and you had to climb up out of the riverbed, then you would go back in, climb back out. It was about a quarter mile, but boy, it seemed a lot further than that. Well, I think it was about 4 a.m. It was a few hours before the sun came up. I was running through the riverbed, and I came out of the riverbed, and then the trail that was taking me back in the riverbed, you had to kind of duck under a tree. And as I ducked under the tree, I saw something hovering in front of me. It was very odd. I don't know if I was hallucinating or what, but I thought it was like a giant moth. And after thinking about it now, that was pretty silly. I mean, how could a moth be so big? But I started looking at it, and at that time I had both of my lights on. I do that often when it's really dark and I get tired. I'm kind of like a freight train going through the woods. I've got a waist light and a headlight. Well, my headlight was staring directly at this thing flying in front of me, and then I see red eyes, and it looked like red teeth. Like his little face was all red. And then it dawned on me that was a bat flying in front of me. So, and it, it seemed like minutes I was there, but it's probably less than 30 seconds while this whole thing happened. But I started to get irritated and didn't know what to do. I mean, what do you do when the bat's trying to attack you? I mean, you always think about snakes or mountain lions or coyotes or wild boars or something, but the last thing I ever thought about was having to deal with a bat. Well, it was hovering right in front of me, kind of faced high. I think it was probably 3 or 4 feet in front of me. It was really not happy that I was going under its tree. I guess it was roosting in the tree when I came under. Well, at that time, I had both of my poles, so I started swinging my Black Diamond pole back and forth pretty wildly. And, bats are blind, and they have a very good sense of radar, and I think it picked up my pole. I mean, I was going to really hit him if he got close to me. And, it quickly flew away, and I was on my way, but that was kind of an interesting experience. You always think of bats living in caves or under bridges, but I guess they can live anywhere, including riverbeds and in trees. So that was something new for me. I'd never experienced dealing with a bat before. Other than that, animal-wise, I didn't really see anything or hear anything out on the Camp Eagle course. Of course, it's private land and it's fenced in. It's got a deer fence. It's hard for any animals to get on there, and I think it's so populated all the time that they have gotten rid of most of the rattlesnakes and other dangerous things. I'm sure they're out there, but not very many. It's just a heavily trafficked trail system. Mountain bikers, campers, and they do a good job of protecting everybody that goes out there. And the last thing they want to do is someone get hurt. Well, I proceeded to go in on my third lap, and like I said, I turned in my lights and got back on the course, but I realized that on about halfway through the third lap in the sun that I forgot to apply my sun protection again. And like I said, I got lucky. I had applied it very well on Friday afternoon. At the last aid station, I was really worried about it because I was hours and hours in direct sunlight. There was a lady that had some sun protection. It was her personal supply, and she let me use some of it. And that was a really a blessing, and it made me feel a bit better. Also, at the beginning of that loop, I really was looking for caffeine, and there was none to be found. And at the second aid station, I asked them, "Do you have any caffeine?" I've asked all the aid stations that, and they're like, "No, we sure don't." And I looked down, and there's a bottle of 5-hour energy caffeine. It's a new bottle. And I said, "Can I have that?" And they said, "Sure, go ahead. Some runner dropped it, and it was turned in, but no one's claimed it." I was like, "Boy, that's a blessing. I never use that stuff, but caffeine's caffeine." So I was worried it was going to upset my stomach because I've never used it before. So I drank half the bottle, and then probably 2 hours later, I drank the rest, and I felt great. I felt pretty good. It really made a difference for me. And I came in, like I said, early afternoon, finished the race, and I wasn't really happy with my performance, but I was pretty consistent. I had to hike a big part of the last lap, which I was not happy about. But turns out I did very well. A lot of people DNF'd the race, and I think 2 reasons for that. It's a very technical course. The same thing happened in Bandera. It just really beats you up. And I think lack of caffeine, people were really tired. Most people, this wasn't a race where there were too many pros at. I mean, there was one pro, Paul Terranova, but most people, work just like me, so they're going to be very tired. I think one thing I would suggest in the next year is that they start this on a Saturday morning or a Saturday night, not a Friday night. It really made it very challenging. But I think that was the reason for a lot of DNFs. And so I was happy I finished, but I think I could have performed a little bit better if I wasn't so tired. And I think it was good training for my upcoming race in the end of October in Phoenix, the Javelina 100. That's a 100-mile race, and last year I DNF'd at 82 miles, so been thinking about that race all year long, what I could do different, how I can improve my core, because I had some lower back issues, and just kind of learning to pace better and hydrate better. So I think I'm very prepared, and I feel comfortable with the Ultra Olympus. I plan to use those in the race. I'm also going to take a pair of Ultra Temps. I may use the Temps the first half of the race and then use the Olympus the second half of the race. One thing about Javelina is they don't let you use poles. Poles are very useful, especially if you start having back issues or you're really beat up. They can really make the difference in the last part of a race. But in the Javelina 100, they don't let you use poles, so you got to go into it not expecting that as kind of a potential help for you if you run into trouble. Okay, let's talk about ultra news and other topics on my mind. In the running news, this past week, the Nike team, Alberto Salazar, very famous marathon runner as I was growing up, kind of an idol of mine, and has been coach of the Oregon project, the Nike team, for many years. He's been under scrutiny for 4 or 5 years because Kara Goucher and her husband came out as kind of whistleblowers and informed USADA that basically he's doping his athletes. And there's been a lot of debate on, whether he's just, on the fence, borderline doping them. I don't know too much details on it, but it's been going on for 4 or 5 years, the investigation. And this last week he got a 4-year ban, and also another doctor that works with him. I find this very interesting because in ultra running we also have the Nike Trail Team, and we all know that they're a very separate organization, and I would doubt that Alberto Salazar is giving them any of his time. Maybe never even discussed anything with them, but they're both part of Nike. And some athletes, such as Matt Daniels, came out and expressed his views, and basically said that we're not part of them, and our stance is we believe in clean sport. And what's interesting is Nike CEO came out and is supporting Alberto Salazar during the appeal. I'd like to hear, what you think about this subject. You can send me an email at runnerrwe@gmail.com. Drug testing has started in ultra running, especially at some of the big events like Western States, UTMB, but it's a small grouping of athletes that get tested. And the reason for that is the testing is very expensive. And, like in my previous podcast, I talked about, famous triathletes getting busted for using CBD oil, which has had too much THC in it. So unfortunately, the news during the last month, there's been a lot of talk about drugs and running, whether it be road running or triathlon. But now the discussion has been, bleeding over into ultra running, because a lot of road athletes have moved into ultra running. So I think it's a legitimate thing to talk about, because in ultra running we also have some runners which really excel. There's in the sport, and there's a big gap between them and the performances of others. So this is always going to be discussed. Are they doing something to get a gain on their colleagues or not? But I'd like to hear what you think about it. I've made my views pretty clear in previous podcasts that I don't even believe in CBD oil or chewables. Some athletes have discussed, well, it's legal, I'm going to do it. I really take a very conservative approach. I think you shouldn't put any of that stuff in your body, and it's a risk to your colleagues as well when you do that. And it gives you an unfair advantage in the case of blood doping and other L-carnitine amino acid usage, which some of these coaches have used to get an advantage over other athletes. Drop me an email, let me know what you think about it, and I'd like to discuss more about this in future podcasts. Another thing I'd like to talk about is pacers and crew. Excuse me. Pacers are allowed in the U.S. Ultras typically after the halfway point, or in a 100-mile race, usually after the 50-mile point. And they're used to make it more enjoyable for the runner, and also help the runner finish the race. Usually they'll have one or two pacers, going through the nighttime hours, helping them navigate, not get lost, etc., etc. Just makes it more enjoyable. And then also, as the name indicates, pace, help you stay on pace. The pros use them, basically mid-packers use them, back of the packers use them, etc. In Europe, they don't allow this in most races. And my view on it is, I wish they weren't allowed either. I think pacers and crew being the staff, that your friends that wait for you at aid stations, help you change your socks, help you, give you your food. So it's kind of like a pit stop. You can get in and out very fast. I wish that wasn't allowed either. Not because I'm jealous, I don't use them myself, is that I think it's an unfair advantage. I'll give you an example. In my last race, I forgot to put on sunblock. If I had had a crew, I probably wouldn't have forgotten. But when you have to manage everything yourself, it is more challenging, and you need to be on top of your game. When you have 4 or 5 people helping you, it puts runners which don't have a crew or pacer at a disadvantage. Some of the famous races, like Old Dominion, they have a 17-mile stretch that they allow pacers. They call them safety runners, since the trail is very dangerous. I'm okay with that. If there's a risky part of the trail, or you have some sort of handicap, or have some need to have assistance, I'm fine with that. If you're using pacers or crew to support you in the race, I think that's a debatable area, and I don't strongly feel. I just wish that races wouldn't allow them in the U.S. I see some benefit for a pacer if it's a family member or a friend that you want to give them a taste of ultra running and running at night, or et cetera, et cetera. I see the reason to do that, but I wish that would be something that evolved over the years, so that the rules are tightened up on that. I think it's an unfair advantage for individuals which have several pacers and a big crew. That's just my opinion. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the Spartan race coverage. I've never watched a Spartan race. I've heard of them, OCR, obstacle course racing. I've heard about it for many years, and I've shared, miles and ultras with OCR athletes. And I never knew too much about it. I've never seen one. I knew about it. I know what they do, but I've never seen one. But I've watched 2 World Championship Spartan races on YouTube, and the coverage is unbelievable. We talk about in Ultrarunning the UTMB coverage, which in Ultrarunning is really much better than. It's just amazing what they do in France with the cameras and following runners on bikes and motorcycles. The coverage is really amazing. The Spartan racing was the same, and one of the races I was watching was a 30K race. It's 13. It's about 18 miles, and they had cameras on the top runners, the male and the female, the whole race, and even had some drone coverage. It was really amazing. And they talked a little bit about during the race that they hire ultra runners and different elite runners to carry these cameras, and I was just really amazed by the coverage, and I gained a new respect for the Spartan race competitors. Boy, that's some tough stuff. I watched the World Championships in Tahoe, and they're running up the mountain. It's extremely cold, and they're having to carry things, and then they even had to get in the water at one point. It's really some amazing stuff, different niche of running, but boy, those are some really talented athletes. The last thing I want to talk about is some sad news. On September 28th at the Flat Rock 50K in Kansas, Thomas Stanley was hit by lightning and died. He was only a few miles from the finish. He was struck by lightning, and some other runners tried to help him, but it was too late. So my prayers and thoughts go out to him and his family. He had several children. It was just a real sad thing to hear. So it just kind of puts in perspective that, we're out there in the wild, whether it be animals or Mother Nature, was it last year where famous female elite runner basically fell off a cliff and broke some ribs, and it took her about a year to get back into racing. We got to be careful, and there are some dangers out there. Whether or not it be Mother Nature or animals or falling down, what so be it. You gotta really be careful, and we need to enjoy every day, because you never know when your last day is going to be there. Next, I'd like to talk about the Unived Gel product review. It's a technical review on this, what they call Unived. That's UNIVED Elite Gel. This is a gel that is sponsored some big name athletes like Camille Herron, Matt Daniels, and a few others. I bought some of their vanilla sea salt. These are made, something about the company. Unived is an Indian company, and so the gels are manufactured in India. Then they're shipped to the U.S. and then they're distributed by Amazon. I know this because I bought one box, actually 2 boxes. It comes in a box of 6. So I bought 12 gels. The gels arrived, and I happened to order them when they were out, so they were back ordered. So I had to wait about a month to get my gels. They came in, and one of the box I could tell was leaking inside before I even took apart the the shrink wrap. So I contacted them, customer service, and I sent them a picture. They were real nice, and they sent me 2 more boxes, even though I only had 1 box bad. Took the boxes apart, and it looks like that just one gel started leaking, and the rest of the gels were okay. So I cleaned them up, and I've been using them. This gel if you're looking at the gel, it comes in a gel packet that's a little bit larger than the others out on the market. Some of the other gels that I've been using is V Fuel. I usually typically see those at Tejas trail races. I use hammer gels. I've seen those out at trail racing over Texas races, and I also buy hammer gels. Been using those for about 2 years. Goo gels. I buy goo gels, and so those are kind of my baseline, what I'm comparing it to. The Unived Elite gels have 190 calories, so it's about double the calories of a typical gel. And it has a 2-to-1 carbohydrate ratio. That's 30 grams simple sugars and 50 gram complex. It has 855 milligrams of electrolytes. And then it has 2 additives that I wasn't familiar with. One is betaine, betaine. This is a cell stress protection additive. It has 800 milligrams of that, and then it has beta-alanine, which is supposed to reduce fatigue and increase endurance. So it has those 2 additives that the other gels don't have. And then it has some sodium bicarbonate to kind of offset the lactic acid production. Now, I've used these gels during 3 runs during the past week, and the taste is good. I got the vanilla sea salt. I like vanilla taste, and it was good. One thing I will say about these gels is the viscosity is very thin. You know that when you go out on a hot trail run or during a hot race, any of the gels will get very thin, almost like water. Well, this Unived gel, it's that way even in room temperature. So that's one thing I noticed. I would prefer that it be a little bit thicker. I really like the viscosity of the hammer gel and the goo gel, V Fuel as well. V Fuel is a little bit thin as well, but Unived gel is the thinnest of all the ones I've used. And another thing about the Unived gel is that when you try to rip off the tab with your mouth, it's almost impossible. I could tear it halfway. Excuse me. I could tear it halfway and then try to pull it with my hand, and I couldn't rip it off. One suggestion I would have to Unived is that they use a little bit thinner material in their gel housing. It's really hard to rip off the tab. Nothing's more frustrating when you're in a race and you're trying to rip off the tab with your teeth. I've had that issue with like Cliff blocks and goo blocks, that sometimes it's really hard to open it. And with a gel, if it's hard to rip off the tab, you're at risk of cutting your lip. I've done that a few times. So that's something to keep in mind about this gel. The big advantage is it's got a lot of calories. So if you're trying to target, say 200 to 300 calories an hour, you really could survive with one of these gels. Whereas with V Fuel, hammer, and goo, you're usually having to take a gel every 30 to 45 minutes. Cost-wise, these are kind of in proportion in cost. They're about $2.50 each, but they got double the calories as the others. Whereas goo is typically about $1.50 each. Hammer is about $1.25 each. That's if you're buying the big boxes. So I think the cost is in proportion. But what I would say is, my daily job, I'm in procurement. And I know India operating costs are very low. Now, granted, they need to ship to the U.S., but I think their cost per gel should be probably, my opinion, 20 to 30% lower than it is. That's even with the transportation. They got a big advantage over the other manufacturers, because Hammer, I think they're manufacturing in Montana. Goo is manufacturing in California, and V-Fuel, I'm not sure. I know they're stateside as well. So I think they're a little bit expensive for manufacturing in India. So the positives, like I said, a lot of calories, good taste. The vanilla sea salt is really nice. And I didn't have any problems on my run. I did, both of my runs were over 10K. Actually, all three of my runs were over 10K. And I didn't have any stomach issues, nothing any different than I would with the other gels. And I used them before and during the run. My first run, I did it before the run, and then my second run was in the middle of the run, and the third one was in the middle of the run. No stomach issues. I was pretty happy with the performance. Whether or not these two additives for cell stress protection and reduced fatigue works or not, I'm not sure. I didn't really feel anything different. I did feel the jolt of using a gel, because you're getting that sugar jolt. I kind of felt the same jolt that I would with V-Fuel or Hammer or Goo. So I don't really see any big benefit compared to them, other than you get double calories in one gel. The taste is very good too, but as you know, the other gels have a lot of different flavors. Some are good, some are bad. So negative, they're made in India, so sometimes you may get on back order. Also so you have to time it right. I think maybe that's not an issue, but when I bought them, I had to wait a month. I think the bottle pockets, like on the Nathan Largemouth and stuff, I don't think the gel will fit in those bottle pockets, and if it does, it's going to be very tight. Typically, what I like to do is I like to get 2 gels or even 3 gels, and I'll put one with the tab up and one with the tab bottom, and can fit 2 to 3 in a bottle pocket. These are a little bit too large to do that, so you're going to need to put them in your race belt or your vest. Like I said before, the viscosity is very thin. It's very liquid, so you don't want to squeeze these things too hard, or it's going to go all over you. It's just like on a hot day in Texas, we deal with that during the summer. All the gels pretty much turn to liquid, but I checked these gels at room temperature, and they were basically like liquid. So the packaging, I think maybe the box packaging, maybe they could improve on a little bit, because like I said, I had one leakage. But like I said, their distribution's with Amazon once it gets stateside, and the customer service was very good. Responded to me the next day and sent me 2 more boxes for free. So in conclusion, I think that they make a good gel. The packaging maybe is a little bit too large. I think if I were to buy gels, they probably wouldn't be my first choice, but they are a good product. You just need to make sure that they meet your expectations. I mean, you're going to carry them in your vest or your bottle. Cost-wise, they're kind of equal to the other ones, and think they've got some interesting additives. I'm not real sure if they work. I couldn't really see any difference myself, but maybe during a 50-miler, 100-miler, maybe it'll make a difference. I know Matt Daniel used them in Western States, and he got 4th place. So I still have a couple boxes of them, and I will continue to test them, and I'll check in with everyone in a future podcast and let you know how it's going. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. I think they're a good product. Try them out. And like I say, with all my product reviews, I'm not sponsored by anybody. And these gels I bought with my own money. They weren't given to me. So I'm not an ambassador for them, so this is my honest opinion on how they work compared to V Fuel, Hammer, and Goo, as I use all of these products. Thank you for listening to episode 6 of the Mile 62 podcast. If you'd like to follow me on social media, I can be found on Instagram at runnerrwe. That's RUNNERRWE. I post a lot of running pictures and a lot of photos and videos from my trail runs. And it's really the only location I do that other than Strava. On Twitter, I do post some things about latest news and running, and on occasion some pictures. I'm at runnerrwe, and on Strava you can find me Richard, host of the Mile 62 podcast. I post a lot of pictures and of course my runs on there, and I use Strava a little bit differently than other people. I like to discuss things, and I kind of use it as a social media platform. I know a lot of runners just post their runs and don't post pictures and stuff, but I do use it a little bit differently. So welcome to connect with me on there. I also have the Mile 62 Running Club, which we post meetups for runs in South Texas area, and then also meetups when we go to out-of-state runs, trail runs. We have one coming up at Javelina at the end of next month. I enjoy feedback and questions from listeners. If you have something you want to discuss with me, debate with me, or a subject for a upcoming podcast, especially if you are a middle to back of the pack runner, you have an interesting story you would like to just chat with me about, I'd love to have you on the podcast. Please contact me at runnerrwe@gmail.com. And if you would, I would appreciate it if you would leave a review and on iTunes and subscribe. It's a free download, but if you subscribe and leave a review, it helps me get more traction on iTunes for more people to find out about the podcast. Thank you, and enjoy your run. Remember, it's easier to keep up than catch up. That's something real important, Stay very consistent in your running. Daily runs, weekly runs. If you're consistent, you'll improve in your performance.